I worked bloody hard, done some very difficult jobs, very stressful jobs that have nearly killed me, and I wanted the end of my career to be about things that really gave me purpose. I don't think that was why I was put on the planet, but this probably is.
This probably is. Stuart Granger, Lemah Park.
Yeah.
Stuart Granger, Lemah Park. Thank you very much. We're between Macedon and Cobaw Ranges, about an hour northeast of Melbourne. Is that right? An hour and 15. You stock Red Angus cattle and Ryeland sheep. You have a regenerative farming model, and we've talked about it a little bit off camera, which is working really well for you. No pesticides, no artificial fertilisers. You're a former CEO of Weston Foods, Australasia's largest consumer food company, with 35 years experience.
Certainly one of, yes.
31?
No, it's one of. I'm not sure. It depends what metric you use, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, it's a big
one of the
beast.
big ones.
Yeah.
One of the beasts. So and 35 years in the food and agribusiness industry across the supply food chain. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful farm.
It's lovely
We've
to have
got
you here.
Your girls in the background, which
Cheers,
is our audience. Jeremy Clarkson always has a pretty girl picked out. We always have a pretty cow picked out. You were the CEO of one of Australasia's largest food companies. You had the corner office, the salary, the board meetings, and then you walked away to move livestock 3 times a day on a property in the Macedon Ranges. What do you know about the food system that most people don't, and that finally pushed you to do this?
Yeah, so I think it was very much a pull rather than a push. A bit of context, my mother's side of the family were farmers, my wife's family were farmers, used to spend every minute of my childhood on the farm. Although we didn't live on the farm ourselves, we spent a lot of time out in the country. So it was always part of my plan that at some point we would kind of end my career on a farm doing something, and possibly in a portfolio role. And the opportunity just came about probably a bit earlier than I thought, for a number of reasons. But I guess part of the reason as well, my father died age 52, pretty much in his office chair. And I was very determined that would not be me. I worked bloody hard. I've done some very difficult jobs, very stressful jobs that have nearly killed me. And I wanted the end of my career to be about things that really gave me purpose, and we're really part of what I am. And, whilst I enjoyed my career in the food industry, I don't think that was why I was put on the planet, but this probably is.
This probably is. You came from a farming family in the UK, worked across the full food chain for 35 years, and then in 2023, you made the move to Lemah Park, which is where we are now, with your wife, Amanda. What were you hoping to build here? And how does a property with an 1856 cottage and a 180-year history shape the way you think about what you're doing?
Yeah, I think I feel a kind of profound sense of responsibility and custodianship for this property. Apart from anything else, Bronwyn, James, the former owner, you better look after this place. And, if I ever need a reminder of that, the names of everybody who ever lived in our house are written in the mortar on the brickwork.
Wow, everyone up until you.
Yes, we haven't put our names on, but we will do, and hopefully there'll be other generations of Grangers to follow. So, I guess that sense of custodianship was instilled in me, particularly through the time I spent with my grandfather on the farm. He was very bitter about what he'd not been forced, what he'd willingly engaged to do in that post-war agricultural era. And, he assumed that everybody knew that what they were doing was unsustainable. And
this is in the UK?
Yes. And actually felt quite bitter that the pressure never came off. It just intensified.
It
more,
just
more,
became
more.
the
Cheaper,
system.
cheaper.
It wasn't a post-war solution.
Yeah.
It was the system now. Cheap.
But he always, I wouldn't say he bucked the system, but he was always very keen, very keen to sort of remind us of that responsibility. And, told me a story that, really powerful. That just post-war, he was farming a rental property, and good farmers got the opportunity to buy their properties at the end of the war. Poor farmers had their properties taken away.
Okay.
Yeah, if you weren't doing the things
weren't productive enough.
And it was things that we think are horrendous now, like ripping out hedges and draining marshes and things like that. But he was clearly a good farmer, got the opportunity to buy, but had to borrow a lot of money to do that. And not long after he'd done, I think there was some, I don't know whether it was a market issue or I don't think it was a disease problem, but some external shock, and he couldn't make the repayments on the loan. And was, the way, certainly the way he described the story, he was days away from having to leave the farm. And quite emotional, actually. Yeah. Woke up one morning and
heartbreaking.
The whole farm was covered in mushrooms, literally a blanket of mushrooms. Sorry, I got a bit choked up over this. But he sold mushrooms for 3 months.
Wow.
Made enough money to
the mushroom miracle. I love it. What was does he know what the cause of the mushrooms were? Gift from heaven.
Never happened before. Never happened afterwards. Amazing, isn't it?
Wow, I love that.
So I think now we would talk about the importance of fungal mycelia and a balanced bacterial fungal.
Wow.
So
these were edible mushrooms that came up all over the
field
farm.
Mushrooms, and for 3 months he took literally a trailer load of mushrooms
and it saved
into the markets, and it saved him.
That is a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. That is a beautiful story.
Yeah,
I believe that was a gift from heaven.
Oh, look after the land.
Look after the land. And he, from what you describe, he wanted to do the right thing. He was being forced to do things he didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Whatever the intentions, whatever the good intentions of the government of the day.
He wasn't a sort of, he wasn't a hippie or
no.
But he cared about the land. He cared about his animals, but clearly affected him quite profoundly because he was very keen that everybody learned that.
So after 35 years working across the food chain, including at the top, what was the moment or the accumulation of moments where you looked at what the industrial food actually produces and thought, I can't be a part of this anymore?
Yeah, it was nothing to do with the nature of the food industry. From the period I started working in, because I've worked in food my entire career, from whenever it was 1989, 1988 when I started through now, population of the world's doubled.
Yeah.
And we fed that doubling in population, and people have had more disposable income rather than less during that period because the cost of food relative to income has gone down,
so much.
Which in turn has fueled, growth in world economies.
Yes.
I think we should take a moment to say that was a heck of an achievement, and I'm proud to have been part of that.
Yes.
Are there things that, in hindsight, you might have done differently? Well, maybe, and certainly there are some. I think there's opportunities now, and particularly as population growth is slowing, to actually say, well, we made this productive, we made it affordable. Now we actually need to make it, sustainable. And start to put back some of the things that we probably inadvertently took away.
And in fact, we produce probably about twice as much food as we need now. A lot of food goes to waste, but a lot of those efficiencies came from parents' generation and your generation of improved yields, improved storage, shipping, all those sorts of things. So, of course, the pendulum swings.
Yep. And some good things in those. Shelf life's increased without putting loads of nasty things in. We better processing technology, better homogenization, better chill chain control. So I think we shouldn't be too critical. And I think a lot of the things that we would say now, that was a bit of a mistake. We certainly didn't know at that time.
And with both of us have parents who lived through the war in the UK, and grandparents. And I remember my grandmother telling me about the one egg that they got a week. The rations of one egg. The reality then was very different. I think you said it beautifully when you say, now we need to make what we've built sustainable and regenerate the land where we've depleted it and continue to improve.
And I think we're well on the way. Even the big end of town. Okay, you can't do things at the same rate that I'm doing it here on my 150 acres.
Exactly.
I make a massive change. It's a bit more gradual, but impacting much bigger parts of the food system. So yeah, no, I've no regrets at all, and I a lot of really proud moments in my career. The bit that I probably struggled with in the end, most of my sort of early career was in agri-processing and ingredients, and the sort of what I would call the business to business end. Dealing with retailers was hard work. I won't be too rude about them, because over the years they paid me billions of dollars in checks. They're the customer, but it's hard having a customer who doesn't really care much about the sustainability and the ongoing health of the industries that supply it. A lot of that's just because they are so busy and they operate so quickly.
Yeah.
But some of it, I think, is driven by kind of corporate ethics and a stock market that wants to make more and more money. But that was hard. And that was probably what did it in the end. I just got fed up of playing that game.
Well, now Lemah Park sits in a valley between the Macedon and Cobaw Ranges, with Deep Creek just here running through it, an ancient woodland, river flats, basalt slopes above. It was part of a 100,000 acre pastoral run in 1842 that, as you said to me before, ran almost all the way to
I don't think it was quite
Melbourne
that
Airport.
big, but it was a very big, it's
huge
a big
property.
chunk of southern Victoria.
How does this specific country shape your regenerative approach, and what did you find when you arrived that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest shock. I mean, we had 20 acres where we were in Gisborne, but and a few sheep, but I didn't pay that much attention really to how we were sort of operating within the whole system. But coming here, the first thing I noted was that 760 mil of rainfall is almost exactly the same as where we used to live in the UK.
Yeah.
The trouble
Which is surprising. You don't think of it like that.
It really is. You think this is a dry country, and you look at some of the dried out paddocks in March, and you think, geez, this is tough country.
Yeah.
So that was the big shock, and I think the realization that it's not just about the fact that Australia is a bit hotter, not as much as you would think actually, and it gets bloody cold here in winter.
Yeah.
But more about how that moisture is sustained. So a big part of what we've done, the way we graze, the natural sequence contours we've put in, trampling more to make the soils more resilient when it does get wet, so that we're not pugging the ground. I sold all of our foundation cows that were kind of 750, 850 kilos.
Too heavy.
We bought in smaller, lighter, sort of lower impact cattle. Still highly productive, but they sit much easier on the land. So that was probably the biggest sort of consideration, shock, realization. The second biggest, again, water, but water for the animals to drink. So there were 3 troughs, I think, on this whole property when we moved here.
Okay.
There's now 60 water points.
Right.
We've got a few permanent troughs, but mainly we use plug-in movable water. So there's nowhere that I can't put a trough.
Yeah.
And we can graze more regenerative, more ecologically, sympathetically, but also more efficiently. The paddock that we sat in here has been grazed over 2 weeks, and the bit at the end down there, we could probably go back and graze if we really wanted to.
Yep.
I wouldn't, but yeah, so you can get much better recovery. You get higher impact if you've got that flexibility of water, and there's an awful lot that you can fix with a polywire fence. You don't need to do a lot with fencing, but the water is essential.
You spent decades understanding food economics at a scale most farmers never see. And now you're running a small regenerative operation and launching direct-to-consumer boxes. How does the economics of Lemah Park actually work? What does it cost? What does it return? And what does someone with corporate capital behind them do differently when setting up a regenerative farm to what someone starting from scratch might do?
Yeah, no, well, there's about 5 questions in there. So, look, I think first of all, I didn't see this for sort of 2 or 3 years, but I think when we set out here, because we wanted to make this ecologically sound, aesthetically good, and you don't spend 35 years in corporate life and not want to make it profitable.
Yes.
I approach farming like an artist would painting a picture, and I was trying to paint this perfect picture, but I'm a really crap artist, and it just wasn't working. And I thought, why would you do it like this? What you are is really good at fixing broken businesses.
Yes.
Why not use your world-class talent rather than the one you're really not very good at?
Yeah.
And when I sat down and thought about it like that, I guess two things sprung to mind. One was that we were actually looking at the wrong metrics. So rather than look at profitability, profit's important, don't get me wrong. But if you start chasing profitability, I think you do a lot of the wrong things.
100%.
So I am
That's
looking at long-term 5-year average cash flow as my main financial measurement.
Wow, 5-year average cash flow.
Correct. So we will have peaks and troughs. We'll have years where we have to buy some hay in. We'll have years where we have to put some infrastructure in. But it's very much 5-year average cash flow. That's the important financial metric. The other metric that's really important to me is growth. And I sort of boiled it down. So if you thought, well, what do you actually look at when you're looking at, are we growing? Actually, it's soil carbon. It all comes down to, is this farm, is the soil health improving? Is that enabling me to increase productivity? And that pretty much all comes down to carbon. The microbiology follows the carbon, the yields follow the carbon, the diversity follows the carbon. Hard to measure.
I was going to ask you how you measure that.
So we have a couple of projects here. That's part of the thing that really kind of excites me about the farm. And we've just finished a project with Deakin University, which has looked at plant, insect and microbial diversity of this farm compared to our neighbour. Because it was a subdivision, the historic land management was identical.
Right.
The trial plots are literally 30 metres apart across the fence, and the difference is 5 years of regenerative grazing versus 5 years of set stocking.
And what was the conclusion?
I was a little bit surprised. The soil microbiology was sort of somewhat inconclusive. There was some evidence of broader species here. The insect one was was very significant. We have much more diversity of insect life and a lot more higher order insects. Predator insects, dragonflies, parasitic wasps. Tom's farm, it had same insect numbers, but it was all driven by mites.
And flies.
Less flies. He didn't have any stock on it.
Right. Because we're sitting
we might
here
have had more flies.
In an area that's just been grazed. We're sitting on top of fresh paddies. There are cows there. And there's almost no
I think
flies.
I've seen you shoo one away in the half an hour that we've been sat here.
Honestly, in many ways, less than I would have sitting in it's by the side of the road. And that is an indication of there should be flies. Flies are a very healthy part of the ecosystem, but the fact that they're not in huge quantities is a really good indicator.
There's a couple of my pest control officers sat up there, actually. If you see the swallows on the up on the wire over there. They say a swallow eats 2,000 flies a day, so I'm very keen on promoting swallows.
And how do you do that?
So just we do have a few nest boxes, but also just making sure that all of those remnant trees, even dead ones, we've actually guarded off and stopped the cows from getting to them.
Excellent.
So just trying to preserve as much habitat as we can.
So you've been on the regenerative path.
So just the other, can I just the capital one?
Yes.
I think one of the things that I am very fortunate, we have invested off-farm income into the capital base,
right?
Which
is CEO speak for. I had some cash from my retirement, and I've put quite a bit of it in the farm.
And I'm very less into metal and machines, and more into the water reticulation system, the contours, tree planting. These are things that, some of them are lifestyle things. Some of them are kind of quasi-experimental. So we've got a dosing system. We put all of our minerals. We can put urea, non-amino nitrogen. We can put sparagopter into the water directly.
Okay.
So I can supplement the animals with minerals, and if necessary, we don't use the anti-methanogenics yet, but I suspect there might be a day when we have to. So we can do all that with
So this is the supplements to reduce the amount of methane coming out the back of the cow, supposedly. Yeah.
Well, it's the front, I think, mainly.
I'm not 100% sure of this, but my understanding is that it's been a serious flop in testing in Europe. There's animal mortality rates are up and all sorts of things.
I don't know. I think it's what we've got is a system that can be used if we need to.
Yeah.
I really like the fact that I can supplement minerals and all sorts of minerals that like we've got a copper deficiency in the soil here.
Right.
You can't add copper to the soil without killing off your fungi.
Yeah.
I can put copper in the water.
And then it goes through the animal.
And it goes through the animal, and then very gently kind of ends up in the soil. And the animals don't have copper deficiency. It's really important for the coats. So kind of a bit of money in infrastructure. So if you looked at our gross profit line, we would compare very favourably, I think, with anybody in the industry.
Right.
If you added all of my little expenditures on tree planting, and I've never taken a grant. I don't want other people telling me what to do.
Right.
So if you added that in, we've probably spent 3 or 4 years worth of income. But I'm not planning to spend that again.
Right.
We're future proofed. We've put probably I'd still like to plant some more trees, but we put a lot of those things in, and hopefully we can now enjoy that for the next 20, 30 years.
It will be beautiful to come back and see over the years how those things manifest and whether they produce the benefits that you hope.
Well, and the other 2 studies are long-term ones. So the Deakin one's just finished. The other 2. One is Melbourne Water sponsored through RMIT, where we've done soil carbon measurement. We've put flux towers in. There's birdsong and frog monitors all around the farm. Done a million different soil health assessment tests. That's going to be repeated in year 3 and year 5, and that's really about, are these contours making a difference? Is the hydration having an impact on soil health, diversity, and the plantings that we've done in the contours? Is that kind of promoting?
As opposed to just holding more water.
Correct. Yeah. So it's looking at the ecological benefit as well as any soil health from the water. And the other thing the contours allow us to do, which is amazing, is to graze along contours, funnily enough.
Right.
Rather than grazing oblong, square paddocks that go up and down, where typically the top of the paddock gets overgrazed and has thinner biomass. The bottom has loads of biomass and gets undergrazed. Yep. We're now grazing a bit like a par 5 on a golf course. We're kind of navigating our way around.
Through, and you've got better control.
Much more control over the grazing. And then the last one, we've been invited to join the federal government's farm soil health assessment for the next 20 years. So that should be really exciting. That's carbon testing again, down to a metre.
Okay.
As well as a bunch of other things. So that's to compile a database on what's happening to soil on farms, all sorts of different land use types. So we're in as a kind of, a regenerative grazing farm that's done some funky things with landscape hydration. So they'll sort of put us in a cohort and then measure how that cohort's going versus other cohorts. Yeah. So,
well, you've held board seats, you've run major acquisitions, you've managed thousands of people. What did farming humiliate you with that no amount of corporate experience could have prepared you for? And what has been the hardest thing to learn in your first few years at Lemah Park?
Yeah, I think a load of things. I think, from a humiliation perspective, I probably a little bit of, I don't know, would you call it hubris? But, I'd done the grazing courses, watched all the Greg Judy videos. Right, we can fix everything with grazing. And then, sort of 3 years later, actually, you really can't fix pH.
Right.
And on some of the paddocks here where, we've got some quite steep slopes, thin soil, actually you have to take a slightly different approach to those, to the more productive paddocks. So there are some that we can do a bit of overseeding, some that we're just going to have to be more patient. So, we sort of in the process of getting pH right, and just I think I've taken a step back from this sort of very purist, slightly dogmatic regenerative approach to, I wouldn't say it's something halfway between, but actually, there's a bunch of things you need in your toolkit. Grazing is just one of them.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about different land is suited often to different uses.
Yeah.
And one of the core philosophies of what people call commercial farming or whatever is we will make that land adapt whatever we want to do to it, rather than saying, well, that country is really more suited to sheep than cattle, so just don't run cattle there, run sheep. You've been on the regenerative path at Lemah Park since 2020. What are the measurable changes you're seeing in the soil, in the pasture, in the animals, in the biodiversity? And how do you measure progress when you spent your career in a world of quarterly reports?
No, and I do keep a pretty tight scorecard. So a lot of record keeping on grazing and days per cow per acre and those sorts of things. There's a bricks meter and a penetrometer in the ATV. So kind of constantly looking at what's happening to plant health through SAP analysis. There's a microscope that's sat on my office desk. I'm often looking at soil, on slides, at the compost extracts that we're putting on. So a number of things from that perspective. Probably the biggest one though is just the observations every day. And you asked me earlier about the sort of e-collar GPS
collars.
I will be the last farmer in Australia to use those because I love moving the cows.
Yeah, you said that you move them 3-4 times a day. A lot of farmers don't want to do that, or maybe they have a part-time job or something, but you love it.
I love it. And, if I go back to my old job, we were really clear on the things that we needed to be really good at to be successful.
Right.
What I need to be really good at is observing what's the condition of the cows. Is it better than or worse than it was yesterday? How much of the paddock I gave them yesterday have they utilised? Did we take too much, too little?
Yeah.
Did I get the density right, or have they eaten in a patchy manner? And then, what are they going and eating when I turn them into this new paddock? What plants are they going to first? What might they be, deficient in or struggling to digest or. So for me, it's the most important thing that I can manage. Why would I walk away from that and get a machine to do it?
And take away the benefit of that daily observation, daily interaction. Yeah. So you're really accumulating the sort of information that you clearly like to accumulate information and measure it. But interestingly, what you're saying is that what you're finding in practice is that one of the most valuable parts of one of the most valuable ways you do that is by interacting with those animals every day.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've seen your cows, and they are stunning. They are absolutely beautiful. I don't know that I've ever seen healthier coats. Yeah. Beautiful animals, beautiful healthy animals. They just glow. Yeah. Good job.
Yeah. No, thank you. And almost every time I move them, I'm also looking at how well are those animals adapting, who's in good condition, who's bouncing back from a calf well, and thinking about, well, whose calf am I going to keep as a replacement to come into the herd?
Yeah.
So I think without that interaction, this is a holistic system. I think, kind of try and put too much tech in at your peril, really.
And that's what happens when people try to scale, right? Is they say, well, let's try and do this at 10,000 acres. Things like that immediately drop out of the equation. Well, we can't have daily contact with that many cattle.
Yeah, and I think, if I was trying to graze 1 million acres, I'd probably feel differently. But, it's the best 10 minutes, 4 times 10 minutes or 5 times of my day. And we don't always move 5 times a day. In the growing season, I probably try to, because I feel that's when you get the most benefit from the animal impact. But I help organise the Grow Regenerative Farming Festival. That's pretty much a full-time job, January, February for me.
Right.
And the cows were probably being moved every third day.
Right.
We all had a break. Well, they had a break while I was beavering away.
Yeah. For all we know, every time they see you coming, they think, Oh my God, that's the fourth time today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had this gift of rain at the end of February, early March, and then, girls, growing season again.
Back to
We're
it.
back to it.
You're also advising and mentoring the next generation of food agricultural leaders. Where does Lemah Park go from here? And is there a version of what you've built that a younger person, earlier in their career and with less capital, could replicate?
I mean, I love the mentoring. I do some of that as paid work and some of it pro bono. If I go back to my corporate career, I loved deals. I loved M&A, and I loved helping to grow new leaders, managing talent succession, seeing people flourish. So,
and it is the regenerative farming business.
Well, I'm mentoring all sorts of people, from a guy who's running an artisanal bakery down in Dandenong who makes the best sourdough bread. No, this is I still do quite a lot of work in sort of broader food and ag. I've got a marketeer in what we would call commercial bread production who I'm working with at the moment. I enjoy that. They're wonderful people, and kind of trying to help impart some of the sort of things that I've learned, and hopefully stop them making some of the mistakes that I've made. I take a great deal of pride in, and I need that mental stimulation as well. I love farming, but if I didn't have anything a little bit more cerebral, I would struggle.
Is there a version of what you're doing here that someone younger with less money and less experience and less expertise could do? You believe if somebody came to you and said, I'm 22, 25, 30, me and my partner want to do this, we don't have a lot of money. Is there a version of what you're doing that you would recommend for them? Yeah, I mean, I've
seen some land sharing models that are quite effective. There's one of the guys who is in our grazing group. There's three of them share a property, and I think they all do slightly different things. One's got cattle, one's doing veg.
Market garden,
I think one's doing flowers or something. I think I'd be very choosy about who I chose. Yes, but if there was someone with a good idea to do, pastured eggs or something, I'd be very happy to have a chat with them about doing something here.
So doing something, one model that you're suggesting is that potentially someone could come to someone like you and say, you're running cattle, how would you feel about me running eggs behind them?
Yeah. And I don't want to be collecting eggs every day.
But it adds hugely to the fertility of your production.
Correct.
And you don't have to do it.
Yeah. And hopefully, enables them to start to build their own capital base.
So not just look for people that you could get together with and get a farm, but maybe speak to existing farmers.
Yeah. I know a couple of vegetable growers as well who are doing a similar thing, where they're using an unused bit. I'm trying to find a beekeeper to come and keep some bees here. I think that's
probably a tough one.
Yeah, probably people are more open than maybe what you'd think, and I think folk are going to have to be creative. So they're not making any more land, and it's not going to get any cheaper.
And it's a wonderful way to split that resource between people who have accumulated wealth and people who are just starting out or don't have wealth, don't have the generational opportunities, or haven't worked in industries where they earned a lot of money. But also, it seems to be something that's becoming much more acceptable now than in the last generation. It was, look, this is my farm, I run whatever, cows, sheep, whatever. Now, people are much more comfortable doing that. It's easier to have simple arrangements.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's got to be some realism. I realised very early that the 60 acres that my grandfather was farming, when he had 4 children, that and I was one of 4 as well.
Yeah.
That this just isn't going to happen. You need to go and find your way in the world, and hopefully you can come back.
Right.
So, and I wouldn't let either of my 2 sons have this place, not until they've gone and done something, developed their own wisdom, bought some new thinking and some ideas. I wouldn't want them to just take over doing what I'm doing.
Because?
I just think it's a lazy way of sort of going back to kind of practices that aren't innovative, that aren't sort of moving things forward. I would very much like, I don't want to work hard to develop this property and then, have to sell it in 20 years' time.
No.
But equally, Sam and Archie are going to have to kind of come and give me a business plan and show me what they've learned, why they've become the business person or the agroecologist that this farm needs, and persuade me to back them.
And I always encourage farmers to think of their farm as a business, because historically, the last generation or two, when they were at retirement age, the business part died.
Yep.
It was, I've been running 200 steers here on average for 40 years. That's stopped now, and then they sell off the land. It's almost like a chattel sale, where really they should be saying, I've got, which you would be able to do, I've got a brand, I've got a distribution model, I've got a farming system, I've got historical financials, and I'm selling this as a going concern. Then you get the value of the business and the value of the land.
Yeah. I think you appreciate it more as well. My cousin took over the farm that my uncle farmed, and he took it over from his father, from my grandfather. And I'm not sure he appreciates, the beauty, the ecology. I think it's just a job that he finds pretty draining, actually.
Right. So in his case, perhaps something he shouldn't be doing.
I don't know, but I think you have to kind of go away to come back a little bit.
Right, and with fresh eyes. Yeah. Okay, so what you're saying is by going away, you can come back, know whether you want to do this, but also how you want to do
Bring
this.
some fresh
to make
thinking.
Yeah. So you've sat on a federal food strategy, you've sat on several food strategy groups, you've run a company that fed millions of Australians, and now you're moving cattle 3, 4, 5 times a day. If somebody is watching this who's deep in their career, wondering whether regenerative farming is something they could actually do, what do you say to them directly?
Yeah, I think be aware of the commitment. There's a few people who bought properties around here, particularly during that COVID period, who sort of thought that kind of rural lifestyle would be a lot more idyllic than being locked up in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And then, I was at a party not very long ago, and the guy who bought a property over the hill said, "What you do with all this grass?" He said, "I'll mow it, and then it grows again."
That's what it's supposed to do.
Grass grows.
Yes.
Cows need to be moved or fed or looked after. So I think kind of make sure you know what the life is about, because it's very rewarding, but it's quite demanding as well. And there's a lovely saying, we decide the time that these animals come into the world, and the time they leave it. Yeah. Everything else is a duty.
Yeah.
Right. It's so I think make sure you know what you're in for before you take the plunge. There's a lot of, particularly in the regenerative world, there's a lot of people who are very happy to share their time. I do a lot of farm walks here. We've got a great grazing group. There's lots of those around Victoria and Australia. So kind of immerse yourself in it before you kind of shell out a couple of $1 million and buy something.
What's the best way for them to immerse themselves? How do they find these groups? What would be a great way for them to get involved?
There's a bunch of different resources. I mean, there's the Grow Festival that we put on is primarily about networking. It's about learning.
What's that festival? When's it on?
So that's not long happens. That's end of February.
In Victoria?
In Victoria. We're probably going to change to spring for the next one, so that we can actually do a bit more farming. Okay. There's Grounded, which Matt Evans started, which I think is in the Otways this year. We went there to the one he had in Tasmania. In the UK, there's Groundswell. Even our council, our council here put on this amazing holistic land management course, which Jason McCainch leads, which is $120 for a 9-month on-farm, off-farm, everything you need to know to get started in agri.
Fantastic.
That's how I met, a whole pile of the people that we're now sort of coaching each other, peer-to-peer coaching and socialising and, having a laugh together, a cry together sometimes. I think it's pretty easy to kind of get into it. And with the power of search engines these days, you're only a click away.
Look for the nearest. And so what you're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that you don't need to have the farm yet? to become involved and go to these events, meet people, ask them questions. Many of them, like you, are happy to have people out to their properties to share their knowledge, to get a more one-on-one sense before they make a decision.
Absolutely, it's not a big garden. There's a lot of responsibility and know what you're getting into. Very rewarding, but it's a burden. It's hard to go on holiday.
Yes.
So I think first of all that I think find some learning materials, either someone to act as a coach and mentor, do one of these grazing programs and the whole bunch of them, but also don't I see so many people who are particularly kind of new into farming who I've got all the answers. I'm a regenerative farmer. I bought this farm. It's completely clapped out, and I'm going to sort of change it and heal it and what have you. Bullshit.
Yeah.
He's probably quite a good farmer who might have had a few, somewhat traditional practices.
Yeah.
But so I think a bit of humility. Probably don't kind of try and be the purist regen farm or amp grazing operation. Take it in bite-sized stages.
Yes.
We started off the first year, pretty much all I did was every paddock I divided it in half, and so we've doubled our recovery rate.
Yeah, there you go.
And then we've sort of progressed year on year. The other thing that's really important, so many people, they just want someone to give them a system. There is no system.
Right.
What I do is different to what Sam White does just over that hill, because he's on granitic soil. He's got lovely perennial grasses. He's been doing it 15 years. I've got still quite a lot of annual grass. I'm on clay loam. Even our rainfall's different. So don't think copying other people is a good idea. Build your own ecological wisdom.
Yes.
Feel what's
so build your own system. It's good. Is it fair to say that it's good to have systems and processes, but they need to be tailored to what you do, where you do it, and
your
what
context.
You want to do, how your context.
Your rainfall, your soil type, what animals you think you want, what your existing grasses. You can't do what Greg Judy does. He gets 1,500 mil of rainfall. He calls a drought a month that he doesn't get 2 inches of rain.
Yeah.
It's if you try and graze like he does, you'll fall on your face very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to be really curious. So I've spent quite a lot of time researching. So where has rainfall and weather patterns like Newham? And it's Zimbabwe, Eswatini, Mexico, Greece, Spain, and some other sub-Saharan African country. So I've been really interested in what Zimbabwean regen farmers are doing, and they manage their systems quite different to people in North America or Europe. So I think really think about your context, your system, what's going to work for you, your lifestyle. It's I think the most important thing is to develop your knowledge and ecological literacy, as Charlie Massey calls it.
Yes.
And then start to build your own system slowly. Putting on fertiliser, it's not a bad thing. Just try and put on a bit less every year.
Yeah, that's it. It's a journey.
Yep.
It's a journey.
You need some help. So there's lots of help out there. I've never known anybody who's not generous with their advice and help and mentoring. I still call people if I'm having a problem. As I say, we'll be doing this peer-to-peer coaching. Quite often we'll have a big debate on, should I be upping density or increasing frequency of moves, or is it better to till or spray if I want to reseed a pasture? So there's lots of groups like that people can get involved with, and I'd thoroughly recommend it.
Stuart Granger, Lemah Park, Macedon Ranges. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. As you can tell, I really hate having people around the farm and talking about it.
We're both talkers, but thank you very much, and congratulations on a really, really beautiful mob.
Thank you very much.